I think just reminding if you have this feeling that something's going on with a friend or family member, if you're not sure, or you hear them say things or they're acting a certain way, and you don't want to, you know, ask this question straight out, are you being abused? Because that's a hard question and they're probably not going to answer it. They might get mad at you, whatever. You just be that good friend and remind them, just like you said, hey, just so you know, if you ever need to talk to me about anything, I'm here and you can never tell me anything that I would judge you for. Just being that open, good person for them, that safe person. And they might not open right away, but eventually they might use you as the person to come to. And that's important to have someone.
That's Nicole Schmidt, the mother of Gabby Petito and the president of the Gabby Petito Foundation.
Yeah, she's spot on. I think the number is something like the average is like 7 times before most are able to leave, and for all those reasons we discussed. But more times than not, they're either fighting for their own life to stay alive because they know how to navigate sometimes the abuser to either lessen the impact.
It becomes their normal, honestly.
Or they're just not in a position. It knows no socioeconomical boundaries, no race, right? Religion, it doesn't matter. Like, everybody's affected by it. So, think of somebody that is like of a higher prominent status that is held on this level, and this is the life that they've been leading, in front of everybody, but behind closed doors is a completely different life. And now, they need to leave, and then, everybody loves the abuser. He's a great guy.
That's Jim Schmidt, stepfather of Gabby Petito, and also a board member of the Gabby Petito Foundation. This is the Silver Linings Handbook podcast. I'm Jason Blair. Doesn't go by where a woman goes missing in the United States, or a moment where one is not a victim of domestic violence. Nicole and Jim Schmidt stand out for their dedication to raising awareness both about the signs and problems with laws related to domestic violence and the disparities that exist between the way certain missing persons cases are treated by law enforcement, the media, and the public. Nicole and Jim are the parents of Gabby Petito, a 22-year-old woman who went missing in 2021 while living in a van on a part-time basis, hitting the open road to travel across the United States and posting the adventures of her and her boyfriend with the hashtag #vanlife. The purpose of this, van life, was meant to cut down on stress, save money, live as minimalists, to connect with other van dwellers, to find a sense of community, and have the freedom to explore the world by having a moving home. But Gabby never came home. In 2021, the year Gabby went missing and was murdered, on average, nearly 20 people per minute were physically abused by an intimate partner in the United States, equating to more than 10 million people a year, according to the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, a nonprofit focused on the conditions that lead to domestic violence. Their data says that 1 in 4 women and 1 in 9 men reported experiencing severe intimate partner physical violence, intimate partner sexual violence, or intimate partner stalking, with impacts such as injury, fear, post-traumatic stress disorder, and contraction of sexually transmitted diseases. Victims face beatings, burning, strangulation, and a wide variety of other forms of assault that their families and loved ones often have little to no idea about. About 20% of these domestic violence incidents involved a weapon, and when that weapon is a gun, it increases the likelihood of homicide by 50%. Those numbers are no doubt an undercount. Gabby was born to Nicole and Joe Petito on March 19, 1999, on Long Island. She was raised in Blue Point, New York, a small hamlet on Long Island of slightly more than 5,000 people, where 1/3 of the households have children under 18. People go there for the good schools and excellent libraries and the beautiful views of the waters of the Great South Bay, which is so picturesque that has been the subject of Hudson School painters going back to at least the 1880s. This is the type of place where people go to feel safe. Gabby disappeared on a road trip across the country with her boyfriend in 2021 in a case that received international news attention and ended tragically in her body being found near a creek in Wyoming. Her disappearance led to a national manhunt that ended in her body being found by that creek and finding out eventually that her boyfriend was her killer. At first, Gabby's biological father, Joe, reacted negatively to the phrase missing white woman syndrome, but over time and reflection, they realized that there was an opportunity to create equity in the way that missing persons cases are treated. Jim and Nicole have set to address, among other things, the disparities in the way missing persons cases are treated based on ethnic origin and other statuses through the Gabby Petito Foundation. They've helped support efforts related to Black, Hispanic, and Native missing persons. They have also dedicated their time to building awareness about domestic violence. Today, we're going to discuss the challenges of domestic violence in cases of missing persons, the systems that work against victims, and both the warning signs of abuse and why their foundation has put a laser focus on the disparities in the way that missing persons cases are treated. First, I wanted to thank both of you guys for coming on. For you listeners, this is Nicole and Jim Schmidt, who are the parents of Gabby Petito, and they also run the Gabby Petito Foundation. At a time where a day doesn't go by where we aren't hearing a story about someone who goes missing in the United States, and certainly minutes don't go by where there isn't an act of domestic violence committed against someone. Nicole and Jim have really dedicated themselves to raising awareness about domestic violence. And also, I think a great way to put it is finding equity when it comes to the way that missing persons cases are treated, and really advocating for a lot of families. My impression in looking at the work that you guys are doing is that you're not going to be happy until all missing persons cases are treated fairly. In brief summary, in 2021, Nicole and Jim's daughter, Gabby, went missing, and ultimately she was found dead in Wyoming. This is the case that most of you guys are familiar with, that you've heard about, and, a very tragic and sad story. And I think a lot of times when all of us are going through grief, it's really easy to get insular and not really find a way for something good to come out of it. And, so both to you, Nicole and Jim, and just saying it generally, I appreciate the fact that you guys are doing it. I know it takes a lot of strength in moments like this, and I know there are probably also good rewards to bringing something good out of this. I had the chance to meet TJ, your son, at Con and have a real lovely conversation with him. And I'm looking forward to talking to you guys today. And I just wanted to thank you again for giving me your time. And I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. I wanted to go ahead and, just sort of open up by asking you guys a little bit about sort of like, what it was like as parents, when you first found out that Gabby was missing. Because I, as someone who I either have 2 or 3 boys, depending on how you count it. Worst nightmare, right? Like when they get to the point where they can uh, navigate the world for themselves as teenagers, and they go out, and I remember those fears, right? Like what is potentially going to happen to them, and then it doesn't happen, and it doesn't happen, and you worry less. What was it like for you guys when you first realized that she was missing?
Exactly how you described it. It is a nightmare. It's and there's a lot of parents that are struggling and going through that as we speak, because we do see it every day, and they are so scared, but you kind of work through that fear and you do whatever it is you need to do to find your child because
Yeah,
that's important, and you will go to the end of the earth, and I think that's exactly what we were doing at
Yeah.
the time.
yeah,
Yeah, you just stay focused on them and trying to find them. The worry never changes. I don't think, I think now for us it's even more elevated than ever with our other children. But when you get that phone call or when it finally it happens, they report them officially missing. You just have to stay focused on doing what you can for them because it's your child and trying to do everything to find them.
Yeah, I think in the moment, you kind of like you're in another world. Your brain is just focused, hyper focused on doing whatever it is you can. So you're looking at all the information, you're sifting through, all the news stories, whatever you can do to find your kid. Um, it, it it doesn't. You don't feel it like at the time. You just feel focused. You feel scared and you feel tense, but hyper focused and very vigilant on getting that kid home.
yep, yeah, yeah. It's really interesting that you mentioned the part about like you'll do anything. I've talked with people who have had a missing child, and I really believe they would spend their last dime. They would do the shirt off their back, give up their car, and you're right. They're very hyper focused in the moment, and then I've seen as the situation comes to resolution, whether that child is found or it gets long enough uh, that they're missing for long enough that there's sort of a breather or a break, or you find out something really sad happened with them, that there's this moment where sort of like all the emotions come rushing in and flooding in, and you start feeling all those things you didn't. Do you guys go through something like that?
Um, Trying to think back because, obviously we went through the grief process when they found her. I cannot even imagine parent, and I've spoke to some parents that are going through this right now, never finding them, just
Right.
not finding them. That's probably, I would think, worse. I
Yeah.
think we're grateful that we got to bring Gabby home, and I guess for me, I kind of hit the ground running with I was so angry, but so full of like this need to do something to help and to change things that I just kept moving. But um, I can imagine that people fall into depression and go through their grief process differently, and that's okay. Whatever grieving they have to do is what they have to do. But for me, I had to just do something to help because Gabby's story was so big.
Is that how and I mean, you're making a really, I think, an astute point. Is one of the things that I've learned over the years is like, there may be some wrong things to do when it comes to grief, but like in terms of how we grieve, there's no like one path for any of us. There's probably some people in their grieving, they probably could never do something like what you guys are doing, becoming advocates, and there's nothing wrong with that, and that's okay.
It's okay.
Mhm.
Um, and but there's some people who really do get some true value out of it. Um, and I was going to ask you just a little bit about Gabby. I know that it can be difficult to talk about some of these things, but I'm curious what you can tell me about. You know, I had read a bunch of things about her where people had talked about her being vibrant and creative and free spirited and caring a lot about people. And, I'd read about her saving up to doing her traveling, like working extra hours. I don't know how true any of it is really, but working extra hours to travel. And I was just going to ask you guys if you could share briefly a little bit about what she was like and whether she was looking forward to the future in that time of her life.
Yeah, I don't think you described her in that question. So
Mhm.
very, very free spirited, and of course, I think that like she found her niche when she started the YouTube channel, and she
Mhm.
did her first video. It was just fantastic. So we were just really proud of her, and she had this like outlook. Finally, like she found something that she loved so much, because she was such a free spirit. I think she was on that search, that you got to
Mhm.
find yourself, and she was getting there.
Yeah.
But yeah, we were proud of her. We were excited for her, and she was just loving seeing all those beautiful places in our country.
She was really starting to grow as a person. Um, it was really, you watching your kids grow up through life, from little kids and, all the different stages. And then when they become an adult and they go off on their own and you kind of have a little bit less control over them and you're always worried in that sense. But when you start to see them like adulting,
Mhm.
she was always very super focused when there was something that she really wanted to do and she was really passionate about. Like when she was on it, she was on it, and there was like no stopping her.
It was,
She,
yeah,
she,
fearless. She was fearless.
yeah, she
Mhm.
just, and that's
Yeah. Look, because you don't run into it's not every kid who wants to do that kind of traveling or wants to have that independence. Heck, they're not every child who is a young adult, not all of them want to work. You know, some of
Yeah.
that just stuck out to me. And we were talking about this before. You can never tell as an outsider what reality is, right? Like even the best news media coverage is never really going to capture who and what a person is like. But there did seem, and I know we have this tendency to say like every victim lit up the room, but she certainly seemed to be a somewhat unique person. And I'll ask you, did you get, Jim, to your point that you were making about like her becoming independent, you guys having a little control, were you guys feeling a sense of pride in her at that point that like she was? Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. It's like, to go off on her own and to have the courage to do a lot of the things that she was doing. Those are things that people aspire to do, one day when they retire, hopefully if you make it to that
Yeah.
age and you're healthy enough to do
Hmm.
it.
Yeah.
She was like, you know what, I'm going to do it now. I'm able to do it. And we were like, wow, like that's amazing. Go for it,
I know. I'm like, I want to do that, but I have to work.
Right, right. Well, so
Yeah.
it's very funny. If you've ever been out to dinner with me, I do this really crazy thing. So you have the three courses of your meal or whatever at a restaurant. I will always eat the dessert first.
Yeah.
Um, and I think some of this comes from being a reporter and seeing like all the bad things that happen to people. And someone asked me, like, why do you eat the dessert first? I was like, well, like if the brick falls off the top of the ceiling and hits me on the head in the middle of this, I want to die with chocolate in my stomach instead of and so like there's probably something really smart about her approach to life. I was gonna just sort of like transition into just some of my observations about how I first got exposed to the case. It was a few days after it started getting news media attention, and I remember seeing the video. I can remember exactly. It was the old place that I lived in. I can remember I had CNN or whatever it was on mute on my computer. And, it was very clear in looking at the video of Gabby interacting with the police in Utah that this was a very sort of like anxious and uncomfortable person in this particular moment. Like all these yellow flags and red flags were going off. And I didn't even know what it was about. I hadn't even read the ticker part that she was missing. But I remember thinking to myself, whatever's going on here does not feel very safe. And then later in the day, I looked at it and I listened to it. And one of the things that sort of struck me was that I think if people were having a background in mental health, if people were more aware of some of the, whether it's law enforcement or it's the lady in the grocery store or it's whoever's witnessing something, if people are more aware of some of the signs of and ways people behave when they're being controlled or they're being abused, uh, I think we'd all be better off. So I was just curious, without you sort of commenting specifically on that situation, are there things that you guys think that, whether it's law enforcement or just, the person in the grocery store or whoever, can learn to help sort of identify and help in those situations?
Absolutely. I think we domestic violence affects everyone, right? We don't realize it, but it does. Law enforcement definitely needs more training. They are not safe either. They're killed all the time on these calls. These traders are dangerous. These abusers are very dangerous, and they get themselves in these situations, and then sometimes they just don't know what to do. When it comes to everybody as a society, we definitely could stop judging and stop asking why didn't they just leave. That's the worst question, because a victim is completely manipulated and it can happen to anyone. So yeah, training across the board. We're actually developing a first responder training,
Oh,
which
cool.
we're excited about.
Yeah, fire and EMS
So
Oh,
dispatcher.
nice.
yeah,
Yeah, hospital staff.
but
There's a lot of courses out there. There's even like courses for beauticians on domestic violence, on picking up signs. You think about where people go and they tend to speak more openly.
Yep.
So a paramedic in the back of the ambulance, a lot of times people open up and tell them things that they wouldn't tell a police officer or maybe tell a friend. Same thing with like a beautician. People sit down and sometimes they just start talking, or they're able to recognize certain things. So just overall awareness and looking for those signs of power and control. That's really what it's about, is the abusers trying to keep and maintain that power and control over their victim, and they do it in all sorts of ways. And it's not always physical abuse. It's financial abuse, it's isolation, manipulation, gaslighting, and just overall taking control of them. And then when you can see that and start to recognize it, hopefully you can maybe lead a friend or a family member, whoever it might be that's going through it, just knowing how to support them and how to guide them to the resources when they're ready and if they need them, I think is
Yeah.
key.
yeah, and we do need more bills and policy changes, but we also need the training. And the one thing that we found throughout this process is that there's not government funding for a lot of prevention out there. And
Mm.
prevention is really the key to changing it. And that's another thing that we are working on too. We want an education program for the youth, and
Okay.
we want generational change. We want to start saving lives. I mean, these kids. It starts with bullying and relationships, self respect, all this stuff. So we want to get to them while they're young. Start changing the way people are. Prevent them from being abusers, not just from being abused. And yeah, there's a lot of work to do.
Yeah, and there seems to be, I think you guys are getting at, and tell me if I'm wrong here, this idea that there's a lot of stigma
Mm,
around domestic abuse, that it has this synergy with the abuse itself, in the sense that it isolates people. And some of that, I think, does come from, like, maybe uh, to the point that you were making, we as society sometimes have a tendency to look at cases of domestic violence and ask ourselves, like, well, why didn't the person leave? Not realizing that abuse never really works if the person, has an easy avenue out, and that abusers create an environment where you feel like you can't leave, where the consequences of leaving are worse in your mind. They've convinced you of that, than the abuse itself. And I think a lot of people who are in domestic violence situations internalize that, start to think something's wrong with themselves, start to feel shame about it, and are more likely to not reach out. Yeah, are there things you guys can think about that we, as sort of like the friends of people or the associates of people who might be experiencing domestic violence, even if we're not necessarily being proactive and sticking our noses into it per se, are there ways that we can send messages to people that we are open, that we're not judging these kinds of things? That are there ways to sort of like talk about it or just send the signal, hey, I'm here, like to throw out a lifeline?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think just reminding, if you have this feeling that something's going on with a friend or family member, or if you're not sure, or you hear them say things or they're acting a certain way, and you don't want to, ask this question straight out, are you being abused? Because that's a hard question and they're probably not going to answer it. They might get mad at you, whatever. You just be that good friend and remind them, just like you said, hey, just so you know, if you ever need to talk to me about anything, I'm here and you
Yeah.
can never tell me anything that I would judge you for. Just
Yeah.
being that open, good person for them, that safe person. And they might not open right away, but eventually they might use you as the person to come to. And that's important to have someone.
Yeah, that really resonates with me. I got sober in 2002, right after 9/11, when I was living in New York. And the woman who was like really key to me getting sober, she was so slick. She never really talked about alcohol. She just mentioned that she was in recovery in AA and then just hung out with me for like 8 months. And then one day I turned around and was like, hey, I think I have a problem. And I'm sure she said in her mind, yeah, no joke. Um, it's like that idea of creating an environment for somebody and not pushing them necessarily further, but being there for them, being the
Just letting them know the door is open.
Mhm.
You're listening. You're willing to listen. One of the worst things that you can do is like give them an ultimatum, because they get them every day.
yep.
If you don't leave them, then you might as well just lose my phone number or something like that. Like that's just doing the same thing that they're already going through. Just being that empathetic person and having that open ear for them, that open door policy, and be willing to hear them and what they're saying when they're ready.
Yeah. And educating yourself on the dynamics of domestic violence. There's so many free resources out there. You can go to the hotline.org. You can go to domesticshelters.org. I know there's a bunch of other
National
ones.
Network to End Domestic Violence.
Yeah,
There's a tremendous
the
amount.
National Coalition. I mean, there's so many free resources on there. There's even articles on how to talk to a friend who you suspect is going through. So definitely educate yourself, because if you say the wrong thing, you might push them away and make them cower and stay quiet even longer. So it's important to really understand it.
Yeah. You guys had made the point earlier that, um, and I can't remember whether it was while we were recording or we were talking beforehand, that, the prospect of, your daughter being missing and never being found was a really, really sort of frightening one. And I had Bruce Maitland on earlier this year, whose daughter Brianna, in 2004, disappeared in Vermont and still hasn't been found. And that really, that. And he's also sort of devoted himself to his nonprofit private investigations for the missing, which provides private investigators at no charge to families. And, I also had a man on earlier this year named Monte Franck. He's a member of the Mille Lacs Band of the Ojibwe in Minnesota, and his daughter had gone missing several times from the age of 16. And he worked as a EMT, so he was plugged into the law enforcement community in the way that a lot of natives aren't. There were times where she was being sex trafficked, and they would find pictures of her on places like Backpage. There were times where they had nothing on the radar screen. And, he came on and he talked. Eventually, she ended up being murdered after she had started to get her life back together by her boyfriend in 2021. So around the same time, and it's such a shame. And one of the things that we were talking about is like the number of natives that are missing is astronomical as a percentage of the population compared to other groups. And he had mentioned, we were talking about how those cases don't get as much attention. And I know that's not the only demographic. And he's certainly not bitter about the response. but he really had difficult time even being plugged into the law enforcement community, getting their attention and getting media attention in the case. And, I'm curious from your perspective, what made the difference in Gabby's case? And what do you think we can do to bring for some of these other cases the attention that they need? And I know that was like one heck of a question.
No, that's not it. No, we've been asked it before. When we first heard the term missing white woman syndrome, it was slightly like, oh my God, what does that mean? What are you saying my daughter was like, more important than everybody else? Well, yes, because society, saw this blonde-haired, beautiful girl, white girl, and put her up all over the place. And I always call her the perfect victim, because she looks good. She had a video out, she had all this social media. It was like just this storm of sellable content for the media.
Remade, right?
Actually, a term, Joe, Gabby's biological dad, he had said he was like, waiting to go on for an interview, and he wasn't supposed to hear what they were saying. And somebody in the newsroom had actually said, wow, this is a sellable story.
Wow. Yeah.
To be a parent to hear that, you're like, wow, like really.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
It's
but
weird.
to
Yeah.
be honest, obviously, okay, not every missing person's going to have tons of photos like Gabby did. Not every missing person's on social media like she was. Not everybody has a YouTube video out. Not everybody had body cam footage from Moab, like this. There was definitely a scenario that was a little bit more with
Mhm.
Gabby, but a missing person to us is Gabby. It's a missing person, and we
yeah,
care about every single one. I don't care if there's somebody that has a drug history. I don't care if they
mental health
mental
issues.
health issues or from a demographic that may be looked at as nobody cares about them. They're homeless, whatever. They're still missing. Somebody
The
still
people,
loves them. They're still people, even if they don't have family that's looking for them. They're missing.
And there
Somebody.
yeah, because for you to be missing inherently, somebody is out
somebody's
there.
If you're a facilities manager at a warehouse and your HVAC system goes down, it can turn up the heat, literally. But don't sweat it, Grainger has you covered. Grainger offers over 1 million industrial-grade products for all your operations, including warehouse HVAC maintenance. And even better, they offer access to experts and fast delivery, so you and your warehouse can both keep your cool. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
This is your before and after story, where your first steps towards a new life-changing career begin. Southeastern College can take you there. We offer in-demand hybrid and online programs with hands-on training, led by in-field career professionals, and career services to put you on the path to a rewarding and fulfilling future. This is where your transformation begins. Southeastern College, your future is bright. Visit sec.edu to get started.
Before.
and there was just something recently where there was a girl listed as a runaway, and the local police department did very little to put information out there. There was really nothing out there on
Mhm.
social media pages, and this is just very recently. And 5 days later, she was found missing. So
Yeah, and
oftentimes they get
She
labeled
was
as
found missing, or she was
she
it,
was
it
missing.
got it
Found
got
murdered.
labeled as a runaway,
it
and then
pisses me off because a runaway it's usually a runaway would be somebody that's under the age of 18, okay?
yeah.
They're missing. I don't
Right.
care if they made the choice to leave, they're underage and their parents are looking for them. I don't understand why law enforcement decides, well, they ran away, they'll probably just come home. It's not like that. There's trafficking, there's people luring them out of their homes,
Highly susceptible to human trafficking,
Mhm.
sex trafficking, drug abuse in general.
And
Forced in.
it's a reoccurring theme, right? Like if you look at a lot of these cases, unless something very obvious has happened at a scene, hypothetically, or you look at Bruce's case with even Brianna, where like most of us would have seen a picture of that. I've gone up to the spot where it happened. Most of us would have seen a picture of that car driven by and been like, something very bad happened here. But for police who are constantly being exposed to strange things happening, their default reaction tends to be to minimize, or that person's going to be okay, or we only have resources for X, Y,
Mhm.
or Z. So they tend to minimize these cases. And I always wondered whether, are there things that we can do for law enforcement and for family members and other people to give them clues about when their antenna should go up? I assume there's another piece of this, that we can advocate for more funding in these areas. We can do things like this. But I think for me, like in thinking about that example that you just gave, I'm willing, if we rolled back the clock, there's probably something, even in a runaway's life, right? When somebody is running away, it's usually for a reason. It might be because of their own mental health reason. It might be because of their relationship with someone in their house, or really, are there things that you think that we can do before we even get to the question of funding to have better antennas for when something might be wrong? And it doesn't even have to be once a person's disappeared, even before.
I mean, I wish we had all the answers. Obviously, it's a complicated system, and it's probably going to take a long time to figure it all out. But I mean, as far as parents go, and I could speak for parents because that's where I was at, is that when something's wrong. And if you go to the police station and you want to report your child missing, and you say, well, they did leave, but they never came home. And then the police say, well, then maybe they ran away. I mean, with us, we had an adult child, so it was a little different. But if they're under the age of 18, it should automatically be labeled as a missing person, and they should start looking immediately.
Yep.
And time is of the essence. I mean, your child, so when things are off. Hey, they left their phone at home. They never do that. Or, they haven't posted on social media in 3 days. That's not like them. Like you typically know their habits, and those are things that you really have to bring to their attention and say, I know something's not right. Or, hey, they've been hanging out with somebody different that I
Mm-hmm.
don't really know. You know, I'm kind of worried about this. Like those things really highlight it. And then for like the law enforcement agencies, when you look at reporting a person missing, it varies from state to state, and even what systems that they have to upload a missing person to. There's really no continuity. Some report to one system, some report to another. Some states aren't mandated.
Required it. Some are optional.
Yeah, if you get into NamUs or NCMEC or one of those databases, you know, people have the ability, and organizations have the ability to register, to log on to them and review missing persons cases and see those posters. They have the ability to generate posters if your law enforcement agency doesn't have that ability to do. So they have a lot of resources and guides in there. And, it's just, if you don't have the power to do it yourself, look at those agencies that can help you.
And utilize social media, utilize the public, because we see how powerful it is now. And although it can be negative, it can also be very helpful. The Aware Foundation just had one of their posters was seen by a hotel clerk, and noticed the guy had the young girl with him, and they caught him because the person called because they recognized the poster. So it's really important to use social media, and you never know.
NCMEC, which is National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, they have a partnership with Walmart. If you go into a Walmart, they have an entire wall of missing children. There's a Walmart probably almost in every county in this country.
Everywhere.
So, there are
Yeah.
reasons to get the word out.
Well, one of the things that you guys had just mentioned before that really caught my attention, and I'll definitely come back, when you were talking about the idea of like, your child, or your other loved one, and let's say the example, they haven't posted on social media in 3 days. Like for some people, that's not weird, right? Like, okay, I post once a week or twice a week, whoever I am. Some people post several times a day. Is there an element to this where, whether it's social media or they call their grandma every Sunday or whatever it is, where those of us who are sort of around families who are going through this in the initial stages need to sort of like find a way to sort of like defer to your expertise on the person and sort of ask you in a more open-ended way, instead of sort of like having, our list of questions, like what about this feels very abnormal to you, or and maybe a prioritization or triage system like that.
Yeah, everybody has like the normal things that they do. Everybody has kind of like a habit or something they do regularly, especially younger kids are on social media all day long typically. So, if they're not sending out Snapchats for the last 8 hours, which they normally do, their friends are gonna know there's something wrong, you know? So, yeah, getting to ask all the close friends, close family, like, about this person's habits and what they normally do, and something's changed, is really important.
I was very impressed in the town that I live in. There was a kid in our high school. He disappeared for like maybe 4 hours. It was no big deal, but like the parents, his parents, other people's parents rallied really quickly and were like all running around God's creation, checking out different places that he was at. And I remember talking to the local deputy police chief, and I really believe this is true based on the way that I've seen coverage. And they're a smaller department, but what he said to me was, "Oh, every time we hear, they don't like to use the word runaway, but he's like, every time we have a missing person case, we treat it like it's a murder." And or that it is a murder that we're going to prevent. And I thought that was really a great way to think about it. Like, treat it like the worst possible thing is happening right now until you get the evidence that it's not, as opposed to treating it as like we're gonna treat this just like a garden variety case until we get evidence that there is a problem, because we know, the first 24 hours, 12 hours, 48 hours are really, domestic uh, violence tends to escalate, right? Or some of the behaviors of these controlling people, tend to escalate. Do you think could that be a mindset shift that people get to?
That sounds amazing. Actually, I always say people should put themselves in the family shoes. What if it was your daughter? What if it was your wife? What if it was, your mother or father or your sister or brother, whoever you wanna say it is? How would you want law enforcement to react to that? Put yourself in their shoes. So, yeah, that's a wonderful mindset, treating it as if it's the worst case scenario and going for it immediately, because with missing persons, it is a time crunch. So,
Yep. Yeah, there's a very sort of like narrow window there. And so one of the things that I was really impressed by in listening, reading about the work that you guys have been doing, and was the idea that, and I imagine it was very hard for you guys to hear the phrase missing white woman syndrome, like it, because for you, it's just your child. It's just your child, and you didn't ask for any of this attention, and you didn't ask for all of us to be in your
right.
life. Um, you know, to hear phrases like that, but I think I've been really impressed by your dedication um, to helping Black families, Native families, people of all sorts of like demographics and different groups get attention for their cases. And I actually have uh, a guest who is coming on, or the episode will come out soon. But you guys are supporting her case, Vanjie Randall
Mhm.
Shorty.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and what she said to me is like the FBI has made more progress on the case since um you guys helped bring attention to it. And I've heard that like more than once, where the ball will move forward, or cases that are like 20 years old will get attention
Mhm.
because so I was really impressed. Why did you guys decide to put a focus on that? Because you certainly, I mean, you didn't need to do any of this. Like, I think we would have all understood if you just stepped away from, well, I definitely would have understood if you stepped away from this and
Mhm.
focused on your grief. Tell me a little bit about how you got there.
Well, I mean, honestly, it is a way for us to kind of channel our energy in a positive way. Everybody, a lot of people we never will probably ever meet across the world, came forward and were doing what they can to try to help find Gabby, or get information. And there's no way we could ever individually pay all of those people back. There's no way. But through our social media, through the channels that we were using to help find Gabby, after everything started to settle down, we started receiving a tremendous amount of messages from people saying that how her story touched them and how it helped them, how they got out of an abusive situation or they recognized certain things. And we saw it as a way to use our grief and Gabby's story to potentially help others, bringing the awareness. And then even when it came to missing persons, we started doing the data and the research and looking into things, and you see the huge disparities,
Mm.
different ethnicities, and even on our own social media pages where, a child will get shared, 350 times, and, there'll be 400 comments on it. And then you'll see maybe a person of color
I
that
actually had, I don't remember
get
who it
shared as well.
was, like a year ago. I shared somebody, I believe it was, I don't know, it was a man. I don't remember if it was a white man, a black, I don't remember, but I remember somebody commented, "Why are you sharing this person?" Like, as if they didn't care about them. And it was just
Mm.
Like,
like, "You should, only worry about kids," or something like that. And I was like, I didn't respond. I'm not gonna respond to it. Like, obviously, that's a person who just doesn't understand, and then they're uneducated. I'm not gonna respond to that. I'm just gonna keep sharing and do what I'm doing. But so that's somebody's son, that's somebody's brother, and I'm going to share them. And I don't care if they're 80 years old. I don't care if
Mhm.
they're, yeah, it doesn't matter.
yeah.
They're
Well,
missing.
and it's interesting that I think we all, and there's gender disparities too, and missing person cases. There's the racial elements. There's that perfect storm piece of it. But one of the things that's really struck me is like, if I stand in a room with most people, I don't know, just most people within my orbit, and I ask, like, do you care about, cases that involve men, African Americans? I will hear a speech from everyone in the room about how it it matters to them. But one of the things that I know from the podcasting world is that many of the podcasters in true crime space, if they do a case on, let's say, missing and murdered Indigenous women, their numbers will drop. And the ones who really care just say, I don't care. Let the numbers drop, right? I'm going to do this anyway. Or I had Kristen Middleton from Orthram, the
Yeah.
laboratory.
Friends with Kristen, yes.
Oh, cool. Oh, nice. Oh,
Yeah.
nice. Yes, she's an amazing person. I had her on recently, and we were looking at their DNA Solves website where they do the crowdfunding for different cases. And you could like literally take cases of like Native and Black people. And you could see like barely any donations were there. So it kind of like, I don't want to say it disturbed me in some way, because it made me think like there's this world around me where I hear everybody saying that they care about these things. But when I look at the dollars or I look at the downloads or I look at the evidence isn't really there. What do you think people can do beyond sort of like words?
I think
Take action. I
actions,
mean,
actions, and
I see it on our pages. I share everybody, and I've looked, and they don't get as many shares.
Yeah.
It's children and women, and then males, and then Black males or LGBTQ people and transgender. It's like they just swipe. They just like keep scrolling. I don't know. I don't know what it is.
yeah,
I
I would say only recently, like I've been paying a lot more attention to it, like just on my own Facebook feed, where it's probably because I'm tuned into an algorithm, but I'm just seeing people sharing missing person stories, and I'm
Mhm.
seeing share a lot of different people that don't necessarily look like them, and it's actually nice to see at least
Yeah.
in that element that they're sharing it, and you're seeing it, starting to
Yeah,
come
it's
to
more people in
prominence.
our
But that's a lot of
circle.
people in our circle,
Yeah,
and
it's
we're just hoping that it grows from
just
there.
keep going. I all we can do is keep going and hope that people pay more attention and keep sharing and listening, and it just spreads out from there. That's really the
Yeah,
only thing we could do.
and oftentimes you see the disparities. Like I said, a young white girl will go missing, and there'll be this vibrant young person, blah blah, went missing this age, and then you'll see a person of different racial ethnicity, and it'll be, well, this person has been known to have drug issues. Like it's the
Mhm.
very first thing that they focus on instead of focusing on the human being
Mhm.
elements, like this person is missing, and it happens often, and it's pretty disparaging to see that.
And it's almost like people are looking for the perfect victim, because I don't think it just like, I don't think a white woman is instantly the perfect victim, because I've seen it in cases where like the moment somebody mentions, oh, that person may have recreationally used drugs, they go down. It's like we're looking for this perfect narrative, and it's almost okay. It's almost like not about finding the person, and it's really about having this perfect story, which
Yeah,
I feel
exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
We don't wanna find the drug abuser, the media doesn't really wanna push that narrative. We wanna find the young girl that had this, beautiful life ahead of her, and, it's a story,
yeah,
and, that's why we work with a lot of organizations that are trying to stop sensationalizing stories, and, like, you're doing a fantastic job
yeah.
interviewing people that may have been through tragedy, but trying to spread the awareness rather than just talk about the story itself and how
And the
crazy it was. Yeah.
information that should be shared should be pertinent into trying to
Yeah.
find them, like the description of what they look like,
Mhm.
the tattoos, clothing, places they known are known to frequent and hang out, things like that. Like, and then if there are other elements to it that maybe this person, if found, could say potentially be dangerous. Maybe they have mental health issues where they
Mhm.
sometimes become violent or something like that. Like that's important to know, but more importantly, like
That doesn't mean don't look for them.
don't look. So that doesn't
Exactly. Like, yes,
just mean
absolutely,
be
right?
cautious.
Like they don't fit that. They don't necessarily fit that narrative. And I don't know whether this is true, so tell me if it's not true. But like one of the things about Gabby's case that I had read was that several, and there's like great debate about which numbers, several other missing people were found in the search for her.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the demographics. I know there was one Asian woman, and I think there was another minority. I don't know the demographics of all the people, but was that was that a strange feeling? Because for me, when I read it, I was like, "This is really weird."
It was weird because it wasn't just, like, in the area, let's say, where they were looking for her, it was all over the country, like, there was an uptick in people caring about finding people all of a sudden, and, they were finding people that had been missing for years in some cases. I know, like, 50 Cent put out this crazy tweet
Yeah, this
that,
girl's got
like
bodies showing up everywhere.
yeah.
They're finding bodies because of this girl, whatever it was. I'm
And I
like,
was just like, "Oh my god," like, people are paying attention right now.
when I,
And that's what one of the reasons why we started the foundation was we wanted to keep pushing this
yeah,
attention,
Mm.
on all missing people, and I think it's gotten better. If I know before I didn't pay attention really, and I think a lot more people are paying attention now. I don't know how Gabby's story kinda shifted things a little bit. I know there's a whole Twitter community out there that's like, "We just developed this community because of Gabby," and it's like hundreds of people, some maybe
Oh
thousands.
wow!
They're all, like, dedicated to finding missing people, so
Oh, that's awesome.
and the thing too with that is, right after Gabby, there was down here in Florida, there was a girl that had gone missing, and she was eventually found murdered, and people like turned out in like droves, like looking for her, like searching the ground, and it got to the point where the local sheriff was kind of like, "Hey, we appreciate it, but we need you to kind of step."
Like back
So
off, people. Right.
that's something, especially if you're dealing with a potential crime scene. So, like, be
But that's
actively looking, but not interfering.
But
yeah,
that's
there are
actually the
yeah.
way. Wouldn't you want it to be that way, where like instead of the sheriff is having to like yell and scream to get people to come out, he's like, "Okay, I need you guys
Yeah,
to
I mean,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
Yeah,
I think it was like,
as a family member of the person missing, you want the attention and you want everybody with eyes out there, but at the same time, you have to respect law enforcement. Remember,
Mhm.
sometimes they don't share everything because they're doing their job behind the scenes,
they may know
and
more than they're
Mhm.
actually saying for a
I
reason.
see a lot of families have struggled with that. They wanna go on social media and say, "Oh, they're not telling us anything," and they wanna get people angry, but behind the scenes, they're actually solving the case. So we have to just kind of find that balanced relationship. If they trust you, if you trust them and you trust each other, there's a good relationship there.
And I've definitely seen that in cases that I've covered where a search starts off as a like, what happened? And then somewhere along the way, law enforcement gets a pretty good idea of what happened. And what the search then really becomes about is finding the person, finding their body. It's not like law enforcement's going to announce, by the way, we got a pretty good idea what happened here, and we're going to try and nail these people. And we're now moving into the phase of they're going to do their thing and do it the same way. So just sort of like being conscientious of what they're doing and what they're asking for. One of the things, I've looked at a lot of the research on sort of like disparities based on gender, race, other socioeconomic factors. And, when it comes to things like media coverage or even law enforcement coverage, I don't know if we talked about this when it comes to missing persons or murders, but, in my former career, I was a reporter. Um, and I was a reporter in DC, Baltimore, New York. That's where I sort of like touched on crime. I was in other places too. Um, you know, in Baltimore, we used to call murders or missing person cases, and this came from the cops, bouncing baby red balls when they had when there was political influence where it was like the perfect victim. And what the cops meant was it was a red ball of fire that would consume your entire career and destroy you if you did not address it. And I think people don't like, and I remember this one time being in New York, and it was like middle night in Brooklyn, and we were at a crime scene. And I'm not disparaging these detectives because I think their heart is in the right place. They just become jaded. And the department rewards them for certain kinds of cases and doesn't. And I remember somebody using this phrase. It was like, we were at a crime scene, and this was a murder. And a woman had been murdered, and the detective said NI8, or no, not N8, NHI. And I was like, what are you talking about? What does NHI mean? And he said, no humans involved. And I was like, man, that is not cool. And he was like, look, this case is going to get no resources. It's going to get no attention. No one in leadership is going to care. I'm going to get dinged for making an effort to solve it. And I just think to myself, like, it's crazy that we're living in a world where we could look at a missing person and a law enforcement officer, and I remember the detective, like, he was a very caring person, could say or think something like that because of the perverse incentives, the perverse political incentives. And I'm wondering to some extent, like, whether you guys are sort of stepping into that breach, a space where the media and political implications don't matter, and where you can sort of like make a difference. And I just wanted to ask you guys what your thoughts are on that.
mean,
Because yeah.
I hope I hope that we can make a difference because I know I'm sick of everything. So, like, literally, I'm sick of. I see these stories and I'm like, again, and all the stories that I don't know about. I'm wondering what's going on with those. I'm sure there's plenty of families out there suffering, and we just don't know about them because the media could care less. I don't know. That was a hefty question. I don't even know if I answered it.
It was, and to me, you kind of summed it up with you knew the detective. He was a good, caring person. To me, it sounds like maybe he was kind of beat up by the process overhead.
Yep.
And they deal with, especially in busy places like that, all the places you mentioned. Those there's no shortage of crime and violent crime, unfortunately. And those guys and girls deal with it day in and day out. And they're very strong people for having to do that. But I'm sure that they get to a point where they do get frustrated and they know there's just not going to be putting any resources into it. And I know they probably go home at night and lose some sleep over it. But they're kind of, lack of a better term, handcuffed with certain things. And it's unfortunate. So maybe organizations like us and others that are similar to us, maybe we can step in.
O'Reilly. You need parts? O'Reilly Auto Parts has parts. Need them fast? We've got fast. No matter what you need, we have thousands of professional parts people doing their part to make sure you have it. Product availability. Just one part that makes O'Reilly stand apart. The professional parts people. O'Reilly Auto Parts. Get 15% off a set of BrakeMess Select, Select Pro, or Import Direct brake pads and 2 rotors now at O'Reilly Auto Parts.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
And, through some of the connections that we've met, you mentioned Othram before, their technology for DNA identification and the time frame, how quickly they can turn around and do it.
It's amazing.
For the minimal cost compared to some other places, which is unbelievable.
And I think public pressure, because of social media these days and people just coming together and rallying for victims is helpful. I know that the FBI called us because Gabby was everywhere, and the FBI actually came to us and were like, "Hey,
That's
we're
a
gonna help
you
you
made me
know."
think of something really interesting. And now that it's years later, I can admit this. But I remember things that I knew I could not get in the newspaper. Like there was no way my editors were going to put it in the newspaper. But I knew if I picked up the phone and as a reporter made an inquiry to the police department or the mayor's office, all of a sudden the case would get attention because they were going to be very fearful that I was going to, write something about it. And meanwhile, I had no intention because I knew I wasn't going to get anything published. But idea of like whether it's your foundation or whether you're a voter in a certain community that you can put, or you're that reporter who can make that extra phone call on the story that you may or may not cover, or that or that you're just curious.
And those areas too have a lot of times they have community, meetings and stuff with law enforcement where they're going over these things. That's the time where you say, hey, they found a missing person that was murdered in our neighborhood. Like, what's going on? Like, start putting the pressure there locally. You don't get the answers from there, kick it up to, the next level of government, in your neighborhood. What's going on? Do we have to be worried here? Like, are we in danger
Just
here?
that story with that young lady who took her life, unfortunately, and she was being bullied. This is a very recent story. She was being bullied, and the parents of the bullies are suing the mom and silenced her. So all these moms, all these people are coming out and saying, well, she can't speak right now, but we could speak for her.
We can speak for her.
Yes.
Right?
It's incredible, like what community can do when you fight for one another. So that's what's important, especially like if something's in your actual community, to go out and put pressure on the police and say, look, we care and we want you to do something. We pay our taxes. We want you to help. So it's important to rally. Yeah.
What do you think? So, that's like a great example to me of what sort of like any of us could do, that we could put pressure, support on things. When I was talking to Kristen Middleton earlier this week about Othram, one of the things, I don't know if we said this when we were talking on the episode or when we were talking privately. I think it was privately. I was like, give me a bunch of cases that aren't getting attention. And we can do episodes on them. I can talk to other podcasters about doing episodes on them. But more importantly, like I can hand them to my listeners and I can hand them to other podcasters and say, hey, will you sponsor this case? Will you go promote this one case? You take this one, I take this one, and that we'll all go together, promote a bunch of cases. So like, it may not be the world's most impactful thing, but I imagine for every person sitting in their chair or listening to this right now, there's something little like that it could do. You could become the guardian angel for a case, or
Absolutely. Every little bit helps. If all you can do is share flyers, do that. Do your diligence a little bit, spend a couple of seconds just making sure that person wasn't found, share the flyer. It does work. People have been found because of that. There's just so many things people can do that to help. And even if it's donating $1, $5, think about 1,000 people, 100,000 people donating $1. You're making a huge impact with that dollar. So,
it's funny you say that. Like I was talking to a woman who's really very involved in Indigenous cases, and she was talking to me about the families, and I was asking her about like, hey, what can I, Jason Blair, personally do? Not creator Jason. What can I do? And she made the point that you had made in the beginning, like people spend every cent, and she was like, you could send a $5 gas card. because these people will use every bit of it. Like you can send $10, $15. And she said, you can send a note of encouragement, like those letters that you guys got from people who said that they were willing to walk away. And she's like, you don't understand how much energy and strength that will give people, even like non-monetary, non-political, just like love, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it's even just the letters that people thanked us or thanked us for sharing Gabby, or, seeing Gabby, and those letters fueled the fire for us to keep going because we know that it works. We know it's helping people. So of course we're going to keep moving forward. So it doesn't have to be money. It doesn't have to be, you know, sponsorships or fancy things for the foundation. Our encouragement is a fuel to the fire that we
Yeah.
want to keep moving.
If they're having a rally in the area where you live, or having, a walk or something like that in support, go and support them. Go stand alongside them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, one of the things that I've been thinking about, you were making the point that there are databases like NamUs, which is the National Missing Persons Database run by the Department of Justice. There's, National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, a bunch of other, the National Missing and there are all sorts of different things. There's law enforcement, there's shelters, there are laws, there are charities like PIC. I think, and you guys hit on this when we were talking about the beginning, there are a lot of misconceptions both about missing person cases and domestic violence. You made the very obvious example of, like assuming, why didn't this person run away from the abuser, which enhances the stigma, which makes it harder. If there were any things about missing persons cases or domestic violence situations, any sort of myths that you could resolve or sort of counter for people, is there anything that comes to mind for you, like you wish other people just saw something more realistically?
Well, I think one myth out there with missing persons is you have to wait a certain amount of time before you have to
Yeah.
report them. Like some people, you have to wait 24 hours. You
It's
have to
not
wait
true.
48 hours or 72 hours. That's not true. You know your loved one more than anybody else, and you know when something's not right. So the moment you realize that something isn't right, start the process of getting them reported. Because we said it earlier, time is of the essence. That's one thing that's out there that I'm not sure where that came from, but
Yeah. And I know we touched on it before about, stop asking why didn't they just leave? But uh, you know, there's this really weird misconception that people have that victims want to be in these abusive relationships. There was surveys done, and it's so strange to me to think that I would believe that someone enjoys, like, wants to be there. Like, people don't understand that they're brainwashed and they're manipulated to stay, and they're in this codependent situation now, just like when
We're
somebody.
often put in literal situations where the costs are too high, whether it's physical or financial
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah,
violence.
they're threatened. I mean,
I
or they
think
have a
that
dog and they don't wanna there's so many reasons.
children, whatever. I mean, I think that statistic in that survey was something like 46 or 48% of people who were surveyed believe that the victim didn't leave because they secretly want to be abused.
Whoa!
I'm
Wow!
like,
Yeah, that was the way it was worded.
and I was like, I almost fell out of my chair when I read that. And I'm like,
Wow!
you can honestly say that if that was your mother or your sister or your daughter in that situation, that they secretly want that. That was like mind blowing to me that was even like a thought in anybody's mind.
In
Yeah.
my experience in my own life, people who have experienced domestic violence, well, actually in my professional life as well, like there's a plethora of reasons why people stay. I mean, you made the point it could be for the kids. Could be because of a dog you love that you think is going to get taken away, or the person threatens to harm it. It could be your own insecurities, right? Like you don't think you're going to make it on your own. It could be a desire to like fix a person, right? I'm very optimistic. I will take Satan right into my doors, make Satan a human being. I really am. It's like one of my toxic traits, as we say. But does it even matter? Does it matter? like, if you think about it, does it matter why, ultimately I'm in this abusive situation? Or does it matter more that, like, or that we are just going to be there for you when you're ready, or when you want to take a leap, or when you want to explore it?
Yeah, it's such a difficult world to navigate. We've learned so much, and people just need to really stop with the judgments because these victims are going through something that if you haven't gone through it, you'll never understand. And empathy can go really far. And when people realize that they have an army behind them, they have friends to back them or family to back them, that'll give them the power when they're ready and when they do it safely to get out when they know they can. So,
Mm.
yeah, I don't I just keep babbling because, like, when I answer a question, I just keep going.
No, she's spot on. I think the number is something like the average is like 7 times before most
Yeah.
of us are able to leave, and for all those reasons we discussed. But more times than not, they're either fighting for their own life to stay alive because they know how to navigate sometimes the abuser to either
Yeah.
lessen
It
the
becomes
impact
it becomes their normal,
and
Mm.
honestly.
or
Yeah.
it's they're just not in a position. It knows no socioeconomical boundaries, no race, right? Religion, it doesn't matter. Like everybody's affected by it. So, think of somebody that is like of a higher prominent status that is held on this level, and this is the life that they've been leading, you know, in front of everybody, but behind closed doors is a completely different life. And now, they need to leave, and then, well, everybody loves the abuser. He's a great guy,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
expected it.
Everybody thinks he's so funny. Everybody thinks he's so,
Oh,
whatever, charming.
In that
Well,
person's possible position.
well, and
Who's
I will often tell people, like, well, the exact same reason, like, that you like this dangerous person or whatever it is, like, that is the trick. That's why they can't get away, right? Like, that people build these walls to protect themselves so they can have exactly what you said, which was power and control. And it's elaborate, and it's not simple, and it's not easy to navigate. Like, a lot of things that you guys said about, like, what people can do for education, for advocacy, for awareness really stuck out to me. But before we go to sort of like listener questions, I wanted to give you guys a chance to, and like I said before, I'm just really struck by how, in all of your grief, you can give other people time and attention like this. And I'm sure, well, I'm not sure. I mean, I'm not guessing. I know because people have said to me how impactful it's been for them. But I wanted to see if you guys had any closing thoughts you wanted to leave people with, and then we can take questions from anyone who has them for a few minutes.
sure. Go ahead.
oh,
Oh, you're not paying attention?
no, I'm paying attention. Closing thoughts. No, well, I just want to thank you for having us on. Um, we're not experts by any stretch of the means on a lot of this stuff. We've kind of been thrown into this world, so if we still educate ourselves every day on a lot of these issues and try to do as best we can. And I think that's just important for anybody with the families. If you have kids, is just trying to educate yourself on these things, being open with them, open with family members, and always being that person that's willing to listen. I think it goes a long way. And, we're just thankful for all the support we still have.
Kind
Yeah.
of yours and not your advice.
What's that?
And I feel like just listening to what you said, felt like, okay, maybe in domestic violence situations, we need to lead with our ears instead of our advice.
And your heart.
And your heart,
Have compassion. For
supportive.
sure. um, well, I think we covered a lot of what I would actually want to close with. I mean, you can follow Gabby Petito Foundation by going to gabbypetitofoundation.org. And we are on Twitter, which is now X. I'm still going to call it Twitter, and Facebook, and TikTok. TikTok's not too crazy. I I don't really know how to do TikToks.
I can't figure out TikTok.
I edit
Very few people do.
but yeah, just follow along what we're doing. We're working on a lot of stuff behind the scenes. I think I mentioned earlier we're trying to build an education program, which is a difficult task, but we're working on that. And we have a training program that's almost done, and we're going to get out there and start training our first responders in our country because
Very cool.
they need it.
Yeah, that was my world for
Because we met when we were EMTs.
24 years. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Mhm.
So
for me,
it's a great place to sort of start for you guys.
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
doing it for so long, I know I look back on my career as an EMT and a firefighter, and I didn't really receive any formal training on it, but we responded to those calls. At the time, I probably never recognized, that maybe it was a domestic violence call at the time, but I'm now looking back on some of them, and they're kind of flooding back into my memories. And I'm like, we as first responders can do better, in that moment if we're called to the scene, just by looking for certain signs, learning how to ask questions properly, being more trauma informed, being less judgmental when we're asking those questions, understanding what domestic violence really looks like, and then just being a person that maybe has the ability to let them know where the resources are, whether they choose to take it.
Yeah, I feel like everybody in the world can just have this training, right? Like everybody should know the resources.
Yeah, like the key players, and then other.
Mhm.
It's interesting to me to think about like, some of that judgment and thinking like, can you put yourself in the shoes of the other person? Maybe you can't imagine um what it's like to be in a domestic violence relationship, but you can imagine your mistakes. You can imagine your decisions that you didn't like. You can imagine the relationship that you stayed in too long. You can imagine like picking the wrong job or the abusive boss and
Remember,
would you,
you're not perfect.
yeah, right. Would you want to be judged for your worst moment, in your worst moment?
Correct.
Yeah. And so I was going to throw up a real quick question. What I can tell you in the chat, I don't know if you guys can see all the chat, but there are a lot.
Yeah, I can see it now.
We just started on. I forgot that we were live.
I forgot to open
Yeah,
it.
you can see a lot of thank yous and a lot of really positive things, which I will definitely save some of them for you. I've starred a bunch of the notes that are there, but we do have a question from, I don't know if you know Raul, but he is known as Catchlisk on X and in other spaces, and he has a missing persons map
I've
related
seen.
to
Yeah.
you guys have probably. So his question is, do you see the ethical advocacy space, and Raul, I wish I knew what that was, enhancing and becoming more impactful?
I actually do. I feel that the narrative's kind of shifting a little bit. I think there is people are caring more about being ethical and not so much sensationalizing it because they're starting to see the impact on the victims' families and wanting to care for them rather than just sensationalize the story and have the story of the week. So yeah, I do think it is for sure.
It's very funny. So, when we were sitting and we were like talking with some really cool podcasters about like the downloads dropping when we did missing and murdered Indigenous people cases, I remember sitting there in that conversation being like, okay, so now I'm doing one every month. I don't care. I will drive this into the ground. And it's like that idea of like being able to put the good for other people ahead of yourself, of the attention. Because I know like we'll do these stories or we'll do these cases and like maybe there's just a chance that one person will be helped or someone will hear something we're talking about in that person's life. And it may have nothing to do with being missing, but it will change their life because they'll be like, oh, that's me. I need to look at that. And so like, it's funny. The reason why I bring it up, I was just thinking about the idea. It's funny. You go with certain intentions to have certain impact and you have no idea what, you're training those EMTs and you don't know the EMT that's in the domestic violence situation for themselves right now.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So a couple of people have brought this up. I'm going to pull up Leslie's comment, but a couple of people have brought this point up. Will the training or the resource materials be accessible on your website or some version of them or education materials? Because I imagine you're going to have different versions for different things.
Yeah, we're working on that version
So-
part. Yeah.
So well, I currently work down here in Florida for one of the largest fire department on the west coast of Florida.
Okay.
And I was able to get some domestic violence awareness training, non-lethal strangulation training for them. So that was 1,200 firefighters and paramedics here, as well as 100 ER physicians and nurses. That program was through another agency, and from there, I realized there is a greater need. And we did a presentation for North Dakota, and originally it was for engaging or for first responders. But as the time came close to do the presentation, we found out that, well, they weren't coming to the table. They couldn't get their fire and EMS
Just
personnel to
advocates.
come. So I had to rewrite my training program, and it was written for social workers, advocates, DV organizations on what the fire service world looks like, who we are as people,
And how we can connect.
and how we can connect with them, how we can bring them to the table. Now I'm refocusing on going back and finishing up that program. So right now I'm kind of doing it, well, we're kind of doing it, going out to these organizations either virtually or in person. My goal is once I can get it certified for like continuing education credits or something along those lines, opening it up and allowing it to be accessible for other people to use.
You really want to get into the big like EMS conferences, the fire department conferences, maybe eventually the sheriffs. I don't know if they're gonna ever let us in, but
But yeah, eventually we'd love to get that stuff up there. The stuff, the program that they want to do for the schools is really in its infancy. October we have a workshop with some school officials, some people from the like online virtual space, some advocates, kind of all coming together, putting our heads together, and kind of coming up with a good program that we feel will work in the schools, that will be free of charge to them.
That schools will allow
That will
in
allow,
the schools.
which
Yeah.
kind of varies from state to state, depending on the climate of the state that you're in.
Yeah,
That's another
that's right.
thing.
In a particular moment, right, lately.
Yeah, and people can advocate too. Like if we introduce a program and we want to in your school, in your community, maybe tell the school, like as a parent, I want this program in my school, like because they'll just say no right off the bat
Yeah.
typically. So
You
tell the
guys.
school, no, I want this. The kids need this. We want this program. So
It's
Well, and
understanding.
maybe also another thing I was just thinking of, that we have all these people who are listening who have different expertise, whether it's like social work or education, or you mentioned the sheriff's example, that, and you get this, like you need to have a hook, the first person who will give you the chance. And maybe people can leverage some of their relationships to support the work or to get you in the door, or like maybe they'll let me do it at my school in my classroom, and maybe that will then spread to the whole school, and then that'll spread to the school district. Or
yeah, I mean, if you have interest in the program right now, just email us at info@gabbypetitofoundation.org. I know it's long and obnoxious, but that's how you can get a hold of us now. But we will have more information on that. And I think eventually, once the program is finished, we're going to put items up on the website that will be kind of training tools that you could maybe use and until you could get us to come in or have a virtual with us. Unless you want to do that right off the bat. But, info@gabbypetitofoundation.org right now, if you have any questions or interest in having us come and talk to you, whoever.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm not going to take much more of your time, but for everybody else, I wanted to just say, for those of you who care about these topics, you can support the Gabby Petito Foundation by going, and I'll say it again, to gabbypetitofoundation.org. You can check out the work, the resources that they have available now, the stuff that will be coming online soon. You also have an opportunity to donate, which will help them develop some of the prevention, education, and training programs, as well as advocate for missing persons. The foundation's goal is to really be a global force for change, and you can be a part of that change. We can all be a part of that. And, one of the phrases Nichole used with me was that it's a way we can do much better together. And I think that's almost always the truth. So I want to go ahead and close with that, and thank you guys again. I appreciate it, and I look forward to like a continued partnership. and being able to support you guys in any way that we can. So
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah,
And thank you everybody that joined to listen. We appreciate you all.
absolutely. Thank you so much, everybody.
and I'll send you guys all the comments for the warm and fuzzies that people left.
Okay. Yeah, definitely reach out to us too.
For those of you who care about these topics, you can support the Gabby Petito Foundation by going to gabbypetitofoundation.org. You can check out their work, the resources they have available, and if you can donate, you have the opportunity to help them develop prevention education and training programs, as well as advocate for missing persons across the country. The Foundation's goal is to become a global force for change, a way that we can do much better together. If you'd like to join us for more discussions with us and other listeners, we can be found on most social media platforms, including a listener-run Facebook group called the Silver Linings Fireside Chat. For deeper conversations with our guests and live conversations with other listeners, you can also join us on our Patreon at www.patreon.com/The Silver Linings Handbook.
You need parts? O'Reilly Auto Parts has parts. Need them fast? We've got fast. No matter what you need, we have thousands of professional parts people doing their part to make sure you have it. Product availability. Just one part that makes O'Reilly stand apart. The professional parts people.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
Get 15% off a set of BrakeBest Select, Select Pro, or Import Direct brake pads and 2 rotors now at O'Reilly Auto Parts.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.